Hello YouTube, Dave here again, and welcome to the final video in my top 5 favorite monsters series. So over the course of the last few videos, I've discussed my love of orcs, greater undead, black dragons in particular, and yesterday I talked about how much I enjoyed or liked the mind flare monsters. So number one is probably not going to be a surprise to anyone who's actually followed this channel for quite some time, or anyone that's ever really gamed with me knows that my number one favorite monster of all time is the Beholder. I just love Beholders, and I've talked about them a few times in the past, and I don't really want to rehash the same stories, so I'm not going to talk too much about some of those experiences, but if you want to know my favorite Beholder overall, and the story involving him, if you go back to the video that I did on my favorite villains, he was in there. It was a Beholder by the name of Oribus Philanthro, and he was a Beholder who masqueraded as a half-elven nobleman, and ended up becoming a trusted advisor to the PCs, and when it was revealed that he was actually Beholder, it was a pretty awesome moment for me personally. So that was probably my favorite experience with the Beholder, but I want to talk a little bit more about what actually started my love of Beholders. And for me, it really came down to picking up my copy of the 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monsters Manual. There was one right on the cover which looked pretty cool, and I was like, I kind of like that monster. I mean, there's a Lich, Minotaur, of course your classic Red Dragon, and a Thicreen, which is kind of unusual. But I kind of like this thing, and I had picked up, just for anyone who kind of wants to know how my early days of collecting D&D books went, I didn't own this until after 3rd edition came out, so I already had the 3rd edition Monster Manual before I was able to pick this up. So when I was running my earliest AD&D campaigns, I was either borrowing a book from a friend, or I was just making up encounters using like the demi-humans and certain things like that. I was given like a list of racial adjustments for like Minotaurs and Vodkin and all these different types of Giantkin and Trolls and stuff like that. So I was just kind of using some of that. But when I finally picked this book up, what really struck me is, I mean, I loved the way the Beholder looked in the 3rd edition Monster Manual. It did look really cool. But what really sparked my imagination was the Beholder and Beholder kin entries. So you have like the Beholder, you have the Death Kiss, you have the Eye of the Deep, the Goth, the Spectator, an Undead Beholder, and that all in of itself seemed pretty cool, but it wasn't all that there was. There's actually even more. So you have the Hive Mother, the Director, the Examiner, the Lensman, the Overseer, and the Watcher. And just looking at things like the Hive Mother, in her description, it says somewhere, the ultimate's true ability is in controlling the actions of large numbers of beholders and beholder kin. A hive mother may have 5 to 10 ordinary beholders under its control, 5 to 20 abomination beholder kin, which it communicates with telepathically. A nesting hive mother spells disaster for a surrounding region, as it can apparently create a community of beholders, beholder kin, and abominations. If destroyed, the beholders and beholder kin will turn on each other or seek their own lairs. So just the idea of the Hive Mother, just being able to control all these beholders, it made me want to basically throw the group up against a hive of beholders, or which you started off with just these beholder worshipping humans that the player characters come across. They battle with them and they defeat what they think to be their leader, before they realize that they are actual beholder worshippers. So they find the beholder that they thought was controlling everything, and then the idea would be that this is only one of the beholders that this Hive Mother commanded. And the player characters, the ultimate goal of the campaign was to confront this Hive Mother and defeat her. So I just thought, again, it was just such a really cool idea, and I love these monsters. I love their abilities. So for me, just reading that entry really sparked my imagination and made me want to use beholders, and it just slowly kind of made them my favorite monster. Another thing that actually made me really want to do more with beholders was the video game Baldurs Gate Dark Alliance. Now, I do plan on hopefully getting to show a gameplay footage of it at some point, like do a complete playthrough. And this may be something of a spoiler, but the Thieves Guild operating in Baldur's Gate is being commanded by a beholder, and there's this huge reveal actually, and it was probably one of the most well done parts of the game. Is early on you get these behind the scene things with the what the villains are doing, and you only ever hear this creature's voice. You never actually get to see it. You know, this commander of this Thieves Guild, and when the reveal was that it was Beholder, it was just such an awesome moment. And I remember how much I enjoyed the Beholder fight and how cool it was. So that for me is what really kind of sparked my imagination and made me really start to love these creatures. And then over time I just kind of used them more and read more on them. And I just really started to develop this huge fondness for them. You know, the thing that I think ultimately cemented them as my #1 monster was probably the Lords of Madness entry. So I showed off Lords of Madness, the third 3.5 supplement book, in my video about Mind Flayers because there was one on the cover. But its entry on Beholders was also equally interesting. It goes over the anatomy of the Beholder, its diet, how it, you know, even reproduces, which is pretty graphic in its description. It is an asexual form of reproduction, but it's something that you really need to read to fully appreciate whatever mind came up with that. And I will say, for anyone who is new to Dungeons & Dragons and their only introduction to the Beholder may be with the 5th edition book, Volo's Guide to Monsters, I don't consider beholders, the way that they say that they reproduce in that book, to be anywhere near proper. The idea that they simply dream themselves into existence just doesn't really work for me. I like the more biological description in Lords of Madness. So if you have the opportunity, if you're new and you like beholders and you want to learn more about them, I would consult Lords of Madness before I consulted Volo's Guide to Monsters. It is stated in Volo's Guide to Monsters that some of Volo's descriptions or explanations of things are wrong, and I consider that to definitely be one of the ones that is definitely wrong. So yeah, so that's it. That's #1. Again, I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail. The only other thing that I will say is that I think one of my favorite versions of Beholders was probably the way that they were handled in D&D 4th edition. And I know saying anything good about 4th edition is usually considered to be, you know, a bad thing, or people say that because I said something nice about 4th edition, my opinions don't matter, which I might make a video on at some point because I really want to address that. But I like the fact that they actually made them solo monsters. And the reason that that was great is in 3rd edition, whenever I would go to use a Beholder, they didn't last very long. They're all offense, but they had very little defense. And just giving them the extra hit points so they can stay around longer to use more of their abilities, something that I really liked. And again, I like the way that they handled it. I also liked it was in, I believe it was in a Dragon magazine. There was the Ocular Adept Prestige class, and I've sort of used the idea behind that in recent history. If you watch my Eye of the Titan live stream from 2017, January 2017, in that I had a cult leader who, again, she was leading this Beholder cult that was posing as worshippers of Amunatar, the sun god. She had a Beholder's eye ray implanted into her forehead, so the Beholder had given up one of its rays and had given it to her. And that was the idea behind the Ocular Adept, is they would receive this gift from the Beholder that they worshipped, and it would give them more and more power. So I just basically gave her the ability to use, I think it was Death Touch, because that was the ray of death? It was just the Beholder's Death Ray. And it may have been the Slay Living spell that emulated. Anyway, that's not really important, but I gave her the ability to use that 3 times per day before the eye would have to basically recharge itself after a rest. So I just really loved the idea of the Beholders, the Beholder cults, the Beholder hives, are all things that I would love to explore. And if Wizards of the Coast ever wanted to make one of their new storylines based off of a Beholder hive and their machinations and their impact on the nearby world, then that would be absolutely awesome, and I would love to see that. So anyway, let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of the Eye Tyrants, the Beholders? Are they monsters that you love? Are they monsters that you just really never did anything with? Is your earliest memory of them from the original OD&D books from 1974, where the Beholder's body was literally just drawn with a compass, and it was like this perfect circle with the eye stalks on it? Or the Dragon magazine, the April Dragon magazine, where you've got the one guy sort of down on a bended knee proposing to this female beholder with this really horrible red lipstick. But let me know what some of your memories are of beholders, some of your encounters with them, some of your experiences with them, and what you think of them as monsters. Is it something that you enjoy seeing? Is it something that you enjoy fighting against or putting your players against? Let me know all of that. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed this series overall. If you have any other suggestions for top 5 lists that you want me to do, please don't hesitate to put those in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to get to those as well. So anyway, again, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.